Anti-Semitism is a form of hatred towards the Jewish population purely because of the religion they practice. Anti-Semitism has existed for millennia and has had a massive impact on our society and the condition of Judaism today. Anti-Semitism has been a major issue throughout history, and it has lasted so long because it can be used as a tool for gaining political power. Anti-Semitism has also been at the root of many of the worst genocides in history, and it is still a major issue at home and abroad. While it is nearly impossible to quantify when the first person expressed hatred towards a Jewish person, the first major anti-Semitic act was carried out in around the 2000s BCE. The Israelites were nomadic tribes living in Mesopotamia at the time when they were enslaved by the Egyptians. They would continue to serve the Egyptians for hundreds of years until the 13th century BCE, when Moses led them out of Egypt and back to Mesopotamia to the Promised Land. When the Israelites returned, they found the Philistines and Canaanites living on their land and waged war on the opposing groups. This war would continue for the next 200 years, with the Israelites eventually overtaking their rivals. While this war was not necessarily an act of anti-Semitism, the next major event was soon to come. After a power struggle resulting in the division of Israel, the Babylonians arrived in the 6th century BCE and exiled the Jews thrice during their rule, in an event now referred to as the diaspora, or the dispersion of Jews across Mesopotamia. During their rule, the Babylonians also destroyed the Temple of Solomon in 587 BCE. As a result of multiple conquests and being exiled multiple times, the Jews were now spread throughout much of Mesopotamia and Europe. This led to yet another act of anti-Semitism in the 14th and 18th centuries CE, when Christian rule arrived in Spain and the Jews were forced out of the region. Overall, Judaism has faced much hatred and violence throughout ancient and relatively modern history that has contributed to anti-Semitism's significance in today's society. The practice of anti-Semitism has continued throughout history as a means of obtaining and/or retaining political power within countless nations and empires. One great example of this we see was with John Chrysostom, a preacher in the early days of the Christian Church. Chrysostom had been educated in Greek philosophy and rhetoric and was infamous for his anti-Semitic speeches and actions. In his hometown of Antioch, there were Christians, Jews, and pagans living peacefully together, even celebrating each other's holidays before he came to power. He often gave sermons criticizing Jewish traditions and practices, which later spread throughout Christianity and would last through the Middle Ages, being especially popular in Europe. He also maintained his own power throughout political instability, specifically under the Roman Empire. When the Christians would riot in the streets over high taxes, he would chastise but also forgive them for their actions. For his own actions, he would even eventually be crowned archbishop by the Roman emperor. We would eventually see this occur again and again throughout history, where an official will use anti-Semitism as a tool to gain political power by blaming the Jews for society's problems. Many of history's worst genocides and other acts of hatred have been committed against the Jewish community and were led by anti-Semites. The first of many horrendous acts committed against the Jewish community would take place during the 6th century BCE. At the time, there was a power struggle within Israel, with the country eventually dividing in two. The Babylonians took advantage of this civil unrest and conquered the region. When the Babylonians conquered the Israelites, they exiled them, sending them far and wide to regions of Mesopotamia unfamiliar to the Israelites. During this time, the Babylonians would also destroy the Temple of Solomon in 587 BCE, while Jerusalem was under their control. Eventually, however, the Israelites would be allowed to return to their homeland when the Persians came and conquered the Babylonians in 538 BCE. Another anti-Semitic act would be inflicted by the Germans during World War II. This would become known as the Holocaust, and it was an attempt by the German Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler and its allies, to purge Europe of its Jewish population during the 1930s and 1940s. Over the course of the war, 6 million Jews would be systematically executed, with 1.5 million of those being minors under the age of 18. In order to accomplish such a horrifying, disgusting act, the Germans had to establish these 6 concentration camps within their borders. These camps worked 24/7, murdering innocent men, women, and children purely based on their religion. One would wonder how this was even legal under German law. Well, the answer is that before Adolf Hitler gained full control of the German government, he convinced President Hindenburg to sign a law temporarily declaring the rights of the citizens of Germany null and void. Both of these occurrences show just how extreme anti-Semitism has been throughout history and its influence on society and the modern world. Despite what progress we have made in both ancient and modern times, unfortunately anti-Semitic rhetoric and acts of anti-Semitism have been carried out in both the 20th century and today. Anti-Semitism has been commonplace throughout much of U.S. history and continues to this day. Throughout much of the 20th century, vandalism of Jewish cemeteries and synagogues was commonplace. Print media such as books and newspapers were also used to spread anti-Semitism during this time. Throughout much of American history, stereotyping of Jews was common even among the most enlightened scholars. The worst of all, however, was the discrimination faced by Jews in the U.S. when it came to finding housing, education, and employment. According to studies conducted in the 1900s, in Chicago, 22% of 40,000 jobs in the area restricted Jewish applicants. In addition, out of 5,500 jobs in the area, 27% restricted Jewish applicants, with the firm running ads with quotes like, "We're desperate, but not desperate enough to hire Jews." On top of all that, in the real estate business, phone operators were instructed to ask the caller's name and deny service to anyone with Jewish-sounding names. And to make things even worse, in the 1920s, a group of State Department officials gave a presentation to the House Committee on Immigration claiming that America was threatened by unassimilatable and abnormally twisted Jews, describing them as filthy un-American and often dangerous in their habits. While much of this occurred in the past and conditions have improved, we still see occurrences of anti-Semitism across the world today. Specifically in colleges across the U.S., anti-Semitism continues to be rampant. For instance, in 1993, 144 incidents of anti-Semitism were reported at 60 campuses across the United States. In another study conducted in 2002, 106 incidents of anti-Semitism were reported across the U.S. in the audit of anti-Semitic incidents. In both cases, incidents of vandalism such as swastikas and anti-Semitic Jewish-themed parties were reported. Between 2008 and 2010, the Anti-Defamation League counted at least 260 anti-Semitic incidents at college campuses across the United States. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism continues to be an issue today and has been an issue throughout much of American history. Anti-Semitism has had a massive impact on our society. It has been around almost as long as Judaism itself. It has been used as a means of gaining and maintaining political power, and it has been an issue in the U.S. and is still an issue across the world. Despite this grim reality, there is hope for our future. In 2002, presidents from 300 colleges across the country signed a statement in the New York Times demonstrating their support for Jewish students. While we still have a long way to go, hopefully by electing leaders who stand firmly against hate and by continuing to push for social progress in our own communities, we could successfully eradicate not just anti-Semitism, but all forms of hate in the future.